With all of the stiff competition joining the AEW roster as of late, the internet has questioned whether or not Hangman Page as world champion is the right move. I've seen the controversial takes out there. AEW has failed Hangman Page. Or how about Hangman Page was never good enough for the spotlight? These are just a few of the things I have seen as of late on social media, and I 100% absolutely don't agree. Now, I'm not sitting here defending the booking of Hangman Page entirely, but I don't believe things are as bad as some fans try to describe. Instead of pointing out some of the flaws, I've compiled a list of my own with some great ways AEW can save Hangman Page and make his championship reign one of the most exciting ones in AEW history. Now let's kick things off with number 1. Hangman Page must defeat CM Punk clean at Double or Nothing. No matter how you book this match, someone is going to be disappointed. However, I think it's clear that if Page wins this match, it would prove that Tony Khan is truly committed to making sure Hangman Page's title reign is memorable. At the time of this recording, CM Punk has a record of 16 wins and 1 loss. A loss for Punk here not only legitimizes the championship reign for Hangman Page, but it would absolutely shift the momentum largely for Hangman. Let's face it. At this point, people assume that Punk is winning this match. Having Hangman win this match not only reminds you that wrestling could be unpredictable, but I believe that this will create more intrigue for both guys going forward. It's time for AEW to create stories centered around Hangman Page. The feud with Lance Archer felt somewhat rushed and unimportant, despite being an awesome match. Plus, CM Punk winning in Chicago will ultimately be a massive moment for the company. To truly capitalize on the overall success of this feud, I would hope that AEW ultimately decides on building a mega trilogy between both wrestlers. Perhaps this could lead to a change in character when things get stale later on. Hangman Page has been the ultimate babyface, but that brings us to number 2. Why not turn Hangman Page heel? Guys, imagine the reaction Hangman Page would receive for turning heel just because he did whatever it took to retain his belt. This idea could work very well if the plan is indeed for CM Punk to eventually win the belt at All Out. And look, if I'm being honest, this is a very drastic and controversial decision, but this is a decision that immediately demands attention from the audience the moment it happens. Now, since Hangman Page won the championship, he's never really felt like the guy, and being on TV, he's incredibly talented and entertaining, but ultimately, he just doesn't feel like the guy. I imagine Page opening up Dynamite the following week, and honestly, I think he might get the biggest reaction of all time. Now, yes, if the ultimate goal is to create a compelling story that not only makes Hangman Page the most important part of Dynamite, but it also leads to Punk winning the big one in Chicago, this could be the way to do it. But if the goal is to really make Hangman Page the number 1 babyface, obviously, this is not an option. Hangman Page is one of the best wrestlers on the AEW roster, but if you watch weekly episodes of Dynamite and Rampage, you may not know this. Since winning the World Championship, Hangman Page has only had 9 matches total since winning the big belt. Taking us to number 3 on the list, I think it's incredibly important that Hangman Page wins more decisively on television. Let's face it, he's not wrestling every week on television, and when he's having matches, guys, they're not relatively quick matches. This is tough because obviously AEW wants to properly book everyone and allow for everyone to appear strong on TV, but not every match needs to be a 5-star classic. Since Hangman defeated Kenny Omega for the belt, the only match that he's actually had under 10 minutes was against Dante Martin, and this match took place on September 3rd, 2022. I believe that perception is reality, and I don't believe it is a good look for the world champion to also be competing on AEW Dark in a tag match against Serpentico, Matt Hardy, and Isaiah Cassidy. By the way, this match just lasted under 15 minutes. If I'm AEW, I would have Hangman Page start winning more matches on TV decisively. Doing this immediately after Double or Nothing only makes Punk and Hangman 2 at All Out much more special. A truly dominant world champion. If you really want Hangman Page to look like the guy, I think it's time you start surrounding him with some other great talent. And that brings us to number 4. Have Hangman Page lead his own faction. Now, Hangman Page has always been associated with another group that wasn't his own. Whether it was Bullet Club or the Elite, it was always clear that Hangman Page wasn't the number 1 guy in the group. The nice thing about factions, when utilized correctly, it allows for AEW to utilize more talent with little television time. And yes, at times AEW can get chaotic with it, but I do believe that Hangman Page being the leader of a new faction not only reeks of importance, but whoever is associated with this group will also feel just as important. The members that join this faction need to be respected, talented, and of course entertaining. This would be a great opportunity for Hangman Page to be joined by FTR. These guys are looking to become 2-time AEW Tag Team Champions. And also, Tony Khan is trying to benefit from his recent purchase of ROH, which would be a really nice callback for Hangman Page. This could be a really great way to have the top babyface faction also appear on ROH when the time comes. And look, by now, if you haven't noticed, FTR, Bret Hart, there's been a lot of different Easter eggs that maybe point to the idea of Bret Hart joining them, but this would be so much more beneficial for all guys involved, especially because they would be considered the #1 group in AEW. And between a returning Kenny Omega with the Young Bucks and of course Adam Cole with Red Dragon, there's a lot of great trios matchups that you might be able to watch on TV with them going this route, so I really can't see how anybody would argue this idea. The goal here is to make Hangman Page become the #1 most exciting part of Dynamite, and that's very challenging considering how great this roster is. So that leads us to number 5. Hangman Page must win at AEW Forbidden Door. Now this might be the biggest challenge for Tony Khan in AEW. We don't know that many details on the AEW and New Japan pay-per-view, but it's really important that Hangman Page is booked victorious in the main event of the show. It's going to be quite interesting to see how both companies decide to book this card, and it's going to be extremely telling of how Hangman is viewed by the company if he is not in the main event of this pay-per-view, especially because this card is so incredibly stacked for both companies to decisively pick a winner. That's already challenging on its own. If Hangman Page defeats Punk at Double or Nothing, the momentum will have shifted entirely in his favor. And if the finish, by the way, is anything other than a clean win in the main event of the pay-per-view, I think almost all of this would be for nothing. And I just really can't see Tony Khan giving up on Hangman Page. And look, if you want to make your guy the #1 guy, you got to have him front and center everywhere. And that's why I would have AEW put Hangman Page as the cover star for AEW Fight Forever. Now this might not seem as important for a lot of people, but bear with me. AEW is trying to build excitement and anticipation for their first ever console game, and this would be a great way for AEW to show their commitment to Hangman Page as the #1 guy by putting him front and center on the cover. Now, I am personally a major fan of multiple wrestlers being on the cover of wrestling video games, and I think this is really important for AEW to do that with Hangman Page. But of course, there's a lot of other people in the company that you want on the cover. So this is what I would do. If I were the team at AEW Games, I would put Hangman Page on the cover front and center with Jon Moxley, Sting, Jericho, and Britt Baker in the background. Now, for those of you who might argue that Bryan Danielson or CM Punk should be on the cover, I actually do agree. But this is where AEW can learn from their competitors. You know, other sports titles have deluxe editions and ultimate editions, and that could be a really good opportunity for AEW to drum up sales and interest by putting Bryan Danielson and CM Punk on those covers instead. This would be a really good solution for AEW to try to get as many people on the cover as possible, and I think a lot of fans would also be satisfied with this decision, so ultimately everybody would be happy, and Hangman Page looks like the #1 guy. And that brings us to our final solution on this list. And I can't believe I'm saying it, but yes, it might be time to drop the belt. There's a lot of people on this roster in line for the world title, and if AEW drags their feet and they don't capitalize, they very well could be making a major mistake. Now, if there's one thing AEW has shown us in all of the years they've been around, is that their fan base is willing to stay patient for long-term storytelling, and there could be a lot of great layers to a Hangman Page redemption storyline. I think it's safe to say that Hangman's chase was far greater than the booking that's come after. And while we can point fingers and place blame wherever we want, the one thing that remains true is that people are still incredibly interested in Hangman Page. Seeing what happens to Hangman after losing the belt could actually be a really good way to drum up interest again. A man that is conflicted with very few friends in the locker room after losing the belt, it can lead to a massive redemption storyline. It's inevitable to me that Page will be a multi-time world champion, so why not drop the belt? Develop a character that generates sympathy. Hangman Page seems to be a genuinely nice guy, which actually adds more depth to this type of booking. I think when you see a man hit the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, it doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad guy, it just shows that they're going through it. something all of us people in society go through. You don't have to turn Hangman into a heel, you need to turn him into a human. And a human that loses his most prized possession is someone that we can all relate to. But I think all of these choices are great choices. Guys, look, at times I would also question whether or not Hangman Page is the right man for the job. But when you look at the analytics and you hear the fan response, it is more evident now than ever that Hangman Page still has the support from fans all around the world. And it's even more evident now than ever that Hangman Page is better today than he was the year prior. I don't expect you to agree with everything on this list, but I would love to hear your thoughts and your perspective on some of my fresh ideas to help generate some excitement for Hangman Page. I look forward to reading your comments down below.